Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey with the JX Fight Club in Shanghai, China, and today I have a rather lengthy question from our friend Vitaly in Colorado. Vitaly, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce your name. I have a student from Ukraine called Vitaly, so if that's not, please correct me in the comments below. So, our friend has a fairly long question I'm going to summarize. Basically, he's trained Taekwondo a lot for about 7 years, and he did some wrestling in high school, and he feels very comfortable with the wrestler's mindset of be the guy on top, get the takedown, fight for the pin, be the guy on top, right? And I think that's fantastic, that's great. And he also feels really set in his ways as a Taekwondo kicker, you know, with those chambered snap kicks and whatnot. And when he's taken Muay Thai classes, it's really hard to break the habit of snap kicking and the Taekwondo chamber kicks, you know, that sort of thing, to go to the Thai round kicks, you know, following through with the falling step and all that sort of thing. And our friend also enjoys boxing, and there are a lot of boxing gyms in his area that he would like to train at, but they don't offer any grappling, just boxing. And they're very good boxing gyms, and he feels comfortable there, and he enjoys it. Now, our friend says he doesn't plan on competing in MMA. He just wants to train for self-defense and for fitness, but he also wants to feel that what he's doing is good, and if push comes to shove, he'll be able to defend himself, and that basically he's doing the right thing. And Vitaly also mentioned that when he's watched the UFC, Bellator, you know, professional MMA shows, you know, the guys who don't have the strong jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai background tend to not do as well as those who do. So he's asking, should I, you know, continue training in boxing and trust my wrestling, or should I switch over to one of these more traditional MMA camps that have the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Muay Thai focus? And I think that's a really interesting question. When I lived in the United States, I noticed that there was a preponderance of MMA schools, MMA camps, where the MO was basically Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu based grappling with Muay Thai striking and takedowns tacked on as an afterthought. Basically like 80% BJJ based grappling, 20% everything else, and everything else being Muay Thai based striking and you know, a little bit of basic wrestling takedowns, maybe a little bit of judo or whatever. Okay. And I think that's a fundamentally flawed approach to training, honestly, especially with modern mixed martial arts. Now, I'm going to reference the boxing match that the whole world was looking at the other week with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. And I thought I was done with this subject because I thought that if and when Mayweather won, that nothing would change as far as the sport of MMA goes. But I believe I was incorrect in that assumption. And I'll tell you why. Because I think Conor McGregor set the bar for striking much higher in the sport of MMA. Now, really, since the very beginning, since the inception of MMA, there's always been a very high standard of grappling. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt has been the gold standard for what a grappler should be in professional mixed martial arts at the highest level. Okay? And later on, when wrestlers started to dominate, people started to understand, you know, a fusion of good wrestling and good jiu-jitsu at a high level is mandatory to be a good MMA fighter. You've got to be a good wrestler and good at jiu-jitsu to be a good fighter. But striking kind of fell by the wayside, which I think is a shame. And the reason for that is, I would say, more, what's the word I'm looking for? More of a tradition than something intelligent. Okay, because when we watched the early UFC, we were looking at people who didn't know anything about grappling. They didn't know how to stuff a shot. They didn't know how to wrestle. They didn't know what jiu-jitsu was at all. And so when Royce Gracie, a jiu-jitsu black belt, fought a guy like Art Jimerson, who was a good boxer, but knew nothing about grappling, man, it wasn't a fight, right? And when Hoist beat all those guys who didn't know anything about grappling, didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu, it looked like, wow, jiu-jitsu is the best martial art, right? It was the best infomercial for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu ever, right? So now everybody understands jiu-jitsu is a very important integral part of mixed martial arts, and if you want to be a serious mixed martial artist, you have to understand at least the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu. But people say the sport has evolved. Really, I think simply our understanding of the sport has expanded a little bit, and we've become less dogmatic about it, right? Because when you have two guys who are evenly matched in grappling, two guys who are expert grapplers, I think a great example is the fight between Renzo Gracie and Matt Hughes. If you can look that up on YouTube, I don't know, check it out, but look up that fight, Renzo Gracie, Matt Hughes. Two expert grapplers, one absolutely dominant wrestler and one fantastic jiu-jitsu black belt. And the commentators before this fight said, we're going to see some world-class grappling. We're going to see some amazing amazing grappling. You know, Hughes is going to fight for the takedown. Renzo is going to fight for the submission, whatever. We never saw that. We never saw it. Instead, Matt Hughes kept the fight on his feet the whole time and kept leg kicking Renzo and pawing him in with a jab, keeping at a distance so he couldn't get the takedown and stuffing his shots. I mean, Matt Hughes was one of the best wrestlers for MMA ever. And if you don't want to put him on the ground, you're not putting him on the ground. Renzo couldn't put him on the ground, and Matt kept the fight standing and just kept kicking Renzo's leg until eventually Renzo's legs gave out. Renzo fell down, couldn't stand up under his own power, and the referee called the fight. The end. Zero grappling in that fight between two very good grapplers. It reminded me a lot of an old fight between John Lewis and some other guy who was also a jiu-jitsu black belt. Both black belts, and the commentators before the fight, this was back, I don't remember, like early UFC, maybe UFC 16, I'm guessing. Anyway, one of John Lewis's early fights, he was fighting a guy, the guy was wearing a gi, John was just wearing the shorts, and the commentator said, we're going to see a spectacular display of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And do you know how much Brazilian jiu-jitsu we saw in that fight? None. Okay? Because John Lewis wasn't just a grappler, he was, I believe, the first real mixed martial artist in the UFC. He was a grappler, a jiu-jitsu black belt, but he was also an expert striker, professional level Muay Thai, expert level boxing, and he just picked his opponent apart with the cleanest strikes I'd ever seen in the UFC to that point, and knocked him out, finished him decisively with authority. And I just watched the screen like, whoa, because I'd never seen that in the UFC. Because before that, you know, we saw grapplers dominate. Jiu-jitsu guys and wrestlers just grab the guys who didn't know how to grapple, put them on the floor, and squeeze them to death. And when we finally got to see a guy who was just as good at that as the other guys and had an extra skill set that they didn't, suddenly we saw the striker dominate. Okay? Really, the rules of MMA, of modern MMA, favor the striker. Think about it. 5-minute rounds. If you look at UFC numbers, you can look up all the statistics. Okay? All of them. The average time it takes to put somebody on the ground, to score that first takedown, the average time is 2 minutes. That means if you get that fight to the ground, you've got 3 minutes to finish on the ground. Okay? And 3 minutes to finish on the ground, that's pretty tough. I mean, it's not impossible. Submissions do happen, but it's tough. It makes it much more difficult for the grappler. Plus, you know, he's probably taken a few shots on the way in. He's spent a lot of energy to get to the ground. And then what happens if the guy manages to get up? If you're fighting a grappler or a striker who's really squirrely and good at his get-ups, and he manages to get up once, you just spent 2 minutes putting the guy on the floor. He just got up again. Now you got to spend maybe even 2 more minutes to put him back down on his back. And then you've got 1 minute left in the round to finish on the ground. And if this guy's good enough to get up once, he's probably good enough to do it again and again and again. Right? Well, tell you what, it's much easier to stand up when you train your get-ups like you should, when you train your grappling with that striking mindset, than it is to attempt sweeps and submissions from the bottom. And trying to hold a man down who is doing everything in his power to stand back up intelligently with technique on his side, oh man, that is a chore. Okay, now, so really the rules of MMA do favor the striker if that striker knows how to grapple. And by grappling, I mean wrestling and jiu-jitsu as they apply to the sport of mixed martial arts. Because again, not everything in wrestling and jiu-jitsu apply to MMA. I love what Chael Sonnen said. He gave this great interview where they were asking him, why are wrestlers so good at MMA? And he said, you know, I don't think it's the technique. I think it's the mindset. It's because these guys, they live tough lives, and they train really hard, and they grind their faces in the dirt over and over and over again. And so they're used to this type of pressure. And they asked him, well, what about the technique? And he said, well really, there are like two things from any given martial art. There are two things from wrestling that work really well in MMA, and everything else you either have to modify heavily or throw in the garbage. And you can say that same thing. You can say that same thing about any martial art. There are like a couple of things from boxing that immediately translate to MMA, okay? And then there are a lot of things you can adapt into MMA, but you got to work with them. You got to struggle and go through a bunch of guesswork and whatnot. And then there's a lot of stuff you have to throw in the garbage. Same thing with Muay Thai, same thing with jiu-jitsu. You know, like Roger Gracie said, 80% of jiu-jitsu doesn't work in MMA. And if you watch some of the crazy, innovative videos that people are coming out with where they're doing, you know, trying to do crazy ninja flips instead of grappling, I would say 80% of modern jiu-jitsu doesn't work in jiu-jitsu competition. Okay, fundamentals win fights, basics win fights. All right, so getting back to your question, Vitaly, I would recommend, learn everything, but you don't have to master everything. So don't be ignorant of jiu-jitsu, don't be ignorant of Muay Thai, but you don't have to be a master of those things to be a good fighter. Okay? I mean, Matt Hughes was not a jiu-jitsu black belt, but he beat jiu-jitsu black belts. Because he was not ignorant of what jiu-jitsu was. I mean, he rolled, he did submission grappling, he trained with jiu-jitsu guys, but he himself was not a jiu-jitsu black belt, in spite of the fact that he dominated black belts all the time, right? Because he kept his mind open, and he trained for that particular situation, right? Now, same thing with those snap kicks, you know. You know, those Taekwondo-style chamber kicks. I did Taekwondo for a decade before I did any other martial art. And it's a fantastic martial art. I love it, but it's also a very one-dimensional martial art, obviously. And if all you know is Taekwondo and you go into a cage fight, you're probably going to get killed unless you have that perfect timing and get that one lucky shot in. Same with boxing and most other striking styles, right? But, you know, there are two or three things, like Chael Sonnen said, that will translate immediately into MMA. I mean, a kick to the head, that high, snappy, you know, if you can throw out a round kick to the jaw as fast as you can throw a jab, that's a valuable tool. That is a valuable tool. And I throw those snap kicks to the head all the time. But it's also great to have, you know, those round Thai kicks that you can throw with your body weight behind them to the legs. Okay? And it's great to have, you know, really good clinch work and know how to throw your elbows in and all those angles and all that. Now, you don't have to be a master, like I said, but don't be ignorant so that there are holes in your game. Okay? Mixed martial arts is not about mastering every single technique, because there's not enough time in the world to do that. There really isn't. What there's time for is to, how can I put this? Focus on a good game plan for you. A book I'd strongly recommend, Advanced Jiu-Jitsu by Marcelo Garcia. And when I initially opened up this book, I thought, this doesn't look very advanced. This is really simple stuff. This is like 300 pages of how to get back mount and finish the rear naked choke. And, you know, there's a little bit of guard passing and a few takedowns and whatnot in there, but by and large, it's a book about how to take your opponent's back and finish him with the most simple, high percentage technique in jiu-jitsu. And when I thought about that for a minute, I realized, wow, that's actually genius. Because advanced jiu-jitsu, advanced martial arts, really, it's the universal stuff that works in all situations, right? It's going to work in a cage fight. It's going to work in a self-defense situation. It's going to work in a grappling tournament. It's going to work against the big guy, the little guy, people with all types of athletic attributes, right? I used to be a big fan of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, I still enjoy that stuff. I still train Eddie Bravo's techniques, pull them off the shelf and dust them off once in a while. I use my rubber guard once in a while. But I used to be all about that. And I used rubber guard constantly when I started fighting because I felt really comfortable with it. I had a certain aptitude for it. My flexibility was really good. I could tap people out with those techniques. And, you know, I started learning, you know, the whole twister top game. And I found out somewhere along the line that that whole game plan kind of falls apart when you're fighting somebody who's you know, like 30% or more stronger than you, or bigger than you, or a much better wrestler than you with a really good top game and really good pressure. You can shut that stuff down in a hurry. I mean, you really can. Even Eddie Bravo has admitted to this. He said, it's really great when you're fighting somebody close to your same size, you know, in your own weight class. But again, as soon as you get to that certain level, bigger or stronger than you, yeah, rubber guard's not going to work. But my friend Dave, he's a big dude. I mean, his shoulders are like this big compared to mine. I'll never use rubber guard on him because my legs simply don't fit around his body that way. They can't. He's just physically too large. I'm never going to try, you know, the twister series from the top because he's too big to move like that. But you know what works on him? Advanced Jiu-Jitsu by Marcelo Garcia. Take the back and work that choke, right? I mean, that's the stuff that works against everybody, okay? And again, getting back to the question, boxing is a great martial art. It's one of the great martial arts that everybody should know. And I would say, if you're a really good boxer and you're a good wrestler, those are probably the most important skill sets for mixed martial arts. And a lot of people would say, what about jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai? What about the kicks? What about the submissions? I'll tell you what's much more important. What is much, much more important than submissions and kicks and knees and elbows and any of that stuff? Position. Position first and then attack. That is the rule to win fights, all kinds of fights. Boxing matches, jiu-jitsu, MMA, whatever. You want to win a fight, regardless of the rules. Position first and then attack. Okay? Boxing isn't just the art of punching. Yeah, you'll get really good at punching, but what is it really? The art of positioning yourself to land a strike. The art of finding your range, boom, so that that strike lands flush. What is wrestling? I mean, yeah, it's taking people down and pinning them on their back, and there's a lot of technique to it, but ultimately, it's the art of position, to put yourself into the dominant position to grapple most efficiently, right? Now, you shouldn't be ignorant of the guard. I mean, learn how to stand up, sweep, and submit from the guard, right? Learn those fundamentals. But really, I believe the most important thing for MMA is base your grappling in being a top player. That means fight for the takedown, fight to be the guy on top. If you don't know what you're doing, ask yourself this one simple question. Am I the guy on top? If the answer is no, fix that. If you're the guy on top in an MMA fight, you're probably winning. Even in the guard, you have a significant advantage. I would say even especially in the guard, you've got a significant advantage if you're the guy on top. Okay? And, you know, sport jiu-jitsu, it's a fun martial art. I love jiu-jitsu. I do jiu-jitsu every day, well, 6 days a week. I do jiu-jitsu with the gi on twice a week, consistently. And without the gi, 3, 4, 6 times a week. And, I do it all the time. But I ask myself, is my technique universal? Okay? Because if I'm doing an upside down berimbolo reverse worm de la Hiva lapel guard thing, clearly that's not going to work without the gi when the guy's trying to drop elbows on me, putting some pressure on, some real pressure on. Okay? But what does work in that situation? Advanced jiu-jitsu. Right? What else? Advanced wrestling, advanced boxing. And what really is the advanced stuff? It's fundamentals done really well. So I know we're going on like 20 minutes here, but I would say your game plan is not a bad one at all. Yeah, go to a boxing gym, keep training your wrestling, and find ways to use that boxing to set up your kicks and set up your takedowns, and at the same time, stay informed about jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. And if you don't have the time or the resources to join a gym that teaches those things, the internet is a fantastic resource, right? I mean, check it out. Get together with some of your friends maybe at the boxing gym, and see if they're interested in training some jiu-jitsu with you, or doing some Muay Thai training with you. And who knows, you might get a little fight team going on or something like that within the boxing gym. But of course, check with the trainers and the owners and make sure they're okay with that sort of thing before you do that. But might be something you could pull off. Anyway, Vitaly, thank you so much for the question. Thank you for watching. Now, get out there and train.